have and to hold from this day forward, for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish, till death do us part, according to God's holy ordinance.
Repeat after me. I, Kelechi Nwosu, take you, Adaeze Chukwuma, take you, to have and to hold, for better, for worse, for richer. I, to hold, for better, for worse. Kelechi.
"3 years. That's how long Adaeze Chukwuma loved a man who was already halfway out the door before she ever noticed. 3 years of quiet sacrifices nobody clapped for. She paid off a debt he was too ashamed to mention to his own mother. She sat across from her father, defending a man her own family had started to doubt, telling them he simply needed time, that good men sometimes stumble before they rise. She took on extra sewing jobs for months, telling no one, so that when the wedding date was finally set, there would be no excuse for him to feel like less of a man at his own ceremony. And when it came time for her dress, she didn't buy one. She made it, every stitch, by hand, in the quiet hours after her shop closed. Because she wanted to walk down that aisle wearing something that actually meant what it looked like. She never asked Kelechi Nwosu for grand gestures. She only asked for forever. Hundreds of kilometers away, in a quiet town called Igbo Ukwu, a plane landed carrying a young man named Kanayo Eze, home after years abroad. His father's new title still felt strange in his own mouth when people used it around him, His Royal Highness. He hadn't rushed home because of a crown he never asked for. He'd come home because there was someone he hadn't stopped thinking about since they were children, sharing lunch under a mango tree, long before either of them understood what their lives would become. When he finally asked after Adaeze, the answer came easily enough. She traveled to the city, they told him, for her wedding. He smiled the way people smile when they've already accepted they're too late for something. He had no idea how late. Lagos. Wedding morning. The hall was already filling with the smell of jollof rice and fresh flowers when Kelechi's phone buzzed once, then again. He looked down without thinking. 5 million naira. Sitting in his account like it had always belonged there. Then the message followed. "It's from me, Goldie. Cancel that wedding and your life changes forever. There is more where that came from." His hands were still unsteady when his best man walked in, straightening his own tie in the mirror. "Guy, this babe is serious-o," Kelechi muttered, almost to himself. His best man, Andy, laughed without even looking up. "Which babe? Oh boy, today ain't your wedding day." Kelechi turned the phone towards Andy. The alert. The message. The name. His best man's smile fell away completely. "Guy, you dey craze. Put that phone for your pocket and come out here. Adaeze wait for you for that altar." Kelechi said nothing back. He put the phone in his pocket. He didn't put away the thought. The walk from the dressing room to the sanctuary felt miles long. The heavy silence between him and his stiff-backed best man speaking louder than any argument. The church was full by 10. A restless energy vibrated through the pews as latecomers scrambled for seats. Adaeze walked in wearing the dress she made with her own 2 hands, and for one unguarded moment, even the people who had watched her struggle for years forgot every hard season and simply saw a woman finally receiving what she had earned. Kelechi stood at the altar, smiling in all the right places, saying all the right things, his eyes occasionally drifting somewhere they shouldn't, his thumb unconsciously twitching against the fabric of his trousers where the phone lay heavy. The priest moved through the vows the way priests always do, words said so often they start to lose their weight. For richer, for poorer. Kelechi's mouth went dry on the word poorer. A sudden, quiet ripple passed through the middle rows, a collective whisper, a few heads turning sharply towards the back entrance as a figure stepped inside, completely disregarding the unspoken rules of wedding attire. He lifted his eyes from the priest's book, and there, 3 rows back, sitting like she had every right to be there, was Goldie. Behind dark, expensive, oversized sunglasses, her face was a mask of cold confidence, completely unbothered by the hushed murmurs of the guests around her. Watching him. Waiting. Confirming, without saying a single word, that everything promised in that message was real, and close enough to reach out and touch. The priest asked the question that was supposed to end in 2 simple words. Kelechi opened his mouth. Nothing came. He turned. He walked. Past his own mother's gasp, past Adaeze's hand, still half raised towards him, frozen in the air like it hadn't gotten the message yet. Out into the daylight, where 5 million naira suddenly felt like the easiest decision he had ever made in his life. Adaeze didn't scream. She didn't fall. She simply stood there, in the dress she sewed with her own hands, very still, the way a person goes still right before they understand that something has become permanent. By nightfall, the video was everywhere. Strangers laughing in comment sections about a wedding they knew nothing real about. Her mother crying into a phone she could not bring herself to put down. Her father sitting in a corner of a half-decorated compound, saying absolutely nothing at all, which somehow said more than words could have. Kelechi, meanwhile, was already standing at Goldie's door, collecting the rest of what had been promised, quietly telling himself this was simply what choosing himself looked like. He felt nothing close to regret. Not yet. By morning, Adaeze's grandmother had made a decision nobody in that house dared argue with. They were going home. To the village. Today. In Igbo Uku, Kanayo opened his phone out of habit and found a photograph spreading faster than anything else online that week. A bride, abandoned mid-vow, her face unreadable in the moment someone had chosen to capture forever. He almost scrolled past it the way everyone else had. Something about the name beneath the photo stopped his thumb completely. Adaeze Chukwuma. He told himself it couldn't possibly be the same girl who used to share her lunch with him, the same girl who once stood between 2 boys fighting in their primary school yard and somehow talked both of them down before a teacher ever arrived. He booked a flight to Lagos anyway. By the time he reached the address he'd been given, the compound was quiet, the decorations from 2 days earlier still standing like evidence of something that had never actually happened. Her mother answered the door, wary of a well-dressed stranger who somehow knew her daughter's childhood nickname. She left for the village this morning, her mother said, with her grandmother. She needs to be away from all this for a while. Kanayo didn't push. He flew back the same day, and instead of announcing himself the moment he landed, he simply waited. He had learned enough about pain, somewhere in those years abroad, to know that it doesn't like to be rushed. Weeks passed quietly. Adaeze began helping her grandmother again, measuring fabric, threading needles, letting her hands do the kind of healing her heart wasn't ready to admit it still needed. She didn't know the new Igwe's son had been quietly asking after her. She didn't know he had stopped himself from visiting more than once, choosing instead to let her find her own way back to herself first, on her own time, without an audience. Then came the afternoon at the market. A trader stood shouting at a younger seller, accusing her of cheating him out of change she clearly hadn't taken. Adaeze, without raising her voice, without making any kind of scene, simply stepped between them and settled it the way she had always settled things. Calmly, firmly, with a certainty that made people stop talking and start listening. A small crowd had gathered to watch. So had someone else. Standing a few feet away, in plain clothes, was a man who hadn't seen her face in over a decade. He didn't recognize her right away. He recognized her voice, her certainty, the exact way she used to settle arguments under a mango tree, years before either of them knew what their lives would eventually become. He took one step closer, his mouth already forming the shape of her name.
Adaeze. The name left him before he could decide whether saying it out loud was wise. She turned, and whatever she'd been about to say stayed lodged behind her teeth because the face in front of her belonged to a boy she'd buried in memory years ago, except now he was taller and dressed like someone who didn't wander into this market by accident. Kanayo? He nodded, suddenly unsure what to do with his hands, the way a person feels at 16, even long after they've stopped being 16. She didn't ask why he was there. She didn't ask how he'd found her. She simply stood there in the middle of the market, traders moving around them like water around two stones, and let herself feel something other than shame for the first time in weeks. He didn't crowd her with questions about the wedding. He never once mentioned the video, though he'd seen it more times than he wanted to admit. He only asked if she remembered the mango tree, and when she laughed, actually laughed, surprising even herself, something in both of them eased at once. They talked until the sun started dropping, about nothing important, the way old friends do when neither one wants to be the one who says goodbye first. Weeks folded into months.
In Igbo Ukwu, small things accumulated into something neither of them bothered naming out loud. Kanayo found reasons to pass by her grandmother's compound. Adaeze found herself dressing a little more carefully on the days she expected him, though she never admitted that to anyone, least of all herself. 300 kilometers away, in Lagos, Kelechi was living the life he had been so sure he wanted. Goldie's penthouse, Goldie's driver, Goldie's name attached to his, opening doors that used to stay shut to a man like him. For a while, it felt like winning. She introduced him as her discovery, dressed him in labels he couldn't pronounce, and for those first months, Kelechi mistook her attention for the kind of love Adaeze used to give him for free. He didn't notice, not yet, that Goldie wasn't loving him. She was managing him. It started small, a missed appearance, slept through after a night spent spending money that was never fully his to spend. A jealous outburst at an event when a man stood too close to her for a photograph, the kind of insecurity Adaeze had once absorbed quietly, without complaint, and Goldie had absolutely no patience for in front of cameras. She corrected him in private at first, then in public, then increasingly in front of people whose opinion mattered to her far more than his feelings ever would.
Kelechi started noticing something he hadn't expected to miss. How much he missed being spoken to gently. How much he missed being trusted instead of managed. How, without quite realizing it, he had traded a woman who built him up in silence for one who tore him down in public, all for money he hadn't actually earned. He told himself it would pass. It didn't. The end came on a night neither of them had planned for cameras, which made it worse when someone filmed it anyway. Goldie had reached the end of whatever patience she had allotted him, and in front of a small crowd outside a club, she said everything she'd apparently been holding back for months, that he had never been anything more than a project, that she had mistaken his weakness for something she could shape, that she was done funding a man who couldn't even manage being grateful. She took back what she could take back that night, the car keys, the phone in his pocket, the one she had bought, even the watch, sliding it off his wrist herself in front of strangers, the same way he had once watched a number land in his account and decided it was worth more than a wedding.
By morning, the clip had more views than his wedding video ever did. Kelechi sat alone in a hotel room he could no longer afford, staring at a phone that wasn't even his anymore, finally understanding the true cost of everything he thought he had won. With nowhere left in Lagos that still wanted him, and no money left to start anywhere else, Kelechi picked up his phone and called the one person who had never stopped telling him the truth, even when he hated hearing it. "I need you to come with me to the village," Kelechi said, the request landing before any explanation could. Andy didn't answer right away. Which village, and to do what exactly? He finally asked, his voice flat with suspicion. Kelechi hesitated longer than felt comfortable for either of them. When he finally admitted that he was going to find Adaeze, to ask her for a second chance, something shifted in Andy's silence before it broke into words. He reminded Kelechi, almost word for word, what he had said in that dressing room months ago. He told him he had no intention of standing beside a man who had ignored every warning he'd ever given him, only to come crawling back the moment the money disappeared. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. What came through instead was something closer to disappointment than anger, which somehow cut deeper.
Kelechi traveled to the village alone. Not to apologize, not exactly, he told himself, though some part of him already knew exactly whose name he was hoping to hear before he'd even arrived. Meanwhile, in Igbo Ukwu, something had shifted that neither Kanayo nor Adaeze bothered denying anymore. He had stopped finding excuses to visit and simply started visiting. She had stopped pretending she didn't notice the moment his car pulled up outside her grandmother's gate. Her grandmother noticed too, the way grandmothers always do, and said nothing beyond a knowing look over her sewing each time he left. One evening, sitting on the veranda in the kind of silence that doesn't need filling, Kanayo told her simply that he wasn't interested in waiting for every wound to heal completely before saying how he felt, because some things are worth saying even halfway through healing. Adaeze didn't answer with words. She didn't need to. Word moves fast in small towns, faster than Kelechi expected. By his second day back, he had already heard it from 3 different people, each version slightly different, the core of it always the same. Adaeze, the Igwe son, seen together, often. He told himself it was probably nothing, the way people exaggerate small-town gossip into something bigger than it is. That comfort didn't last long.
Back in Lagos, Andy came across a post while scrolling through nothing in particular. A man wishing Adaeze a happy birthday, in words careful enough to make even a stranger pause. Andy had no idea who the man was, no idea about any title or any throne. He only knew that whoever had written it clearly knew her and clearly meant every word. He sent it straight to Kelechi without softening a single line. He told him he wasn't sure whether to call him a fool or an idiot, since both seemed to fit equally well, and asked him to look closely at the woman he had left standing at an altar, now being celebrated by someone who actually showed up. He reminded him, one more time, that he had seen this coming from the very beginning. It took him 2 more days to gather enough nerve to find out for himself. He found her at her grandmother's compound on a Sunday afternoon, except he wasn't the only one there. Kanayo sat beside her on the veranda, close in the unguarded way people sit when they've stopped pretending distance matters, laughing at something only the 2 of them seemed to understand.
Kelechi stood at the gate for a long moment before either of them noticed him. It was Adaeze who looked up first. Her face didn't do what he had expected. No shock, no softness, no flicker of the woman who used to forgive him before he'd even finish apologizing. "Kelechi," she said, the way someone greets a person they used to know, rather than a person they once built a life around. He opened his mouth, the apology he'd rehearsed the entire walk over, suddenly feeling small in front of her. "I came to," he started. "I know why you came," she said, not unkindly, just certain. "You heard I might be someone again, so you came to see if there was still a door open somewhere." Kanayo said nothing. He didn't need to defend her, didn't need to assert anything at all. He simply sat there, steady, the way a man sits when he already knows exactly how this ends. "There's no door, Kelechi," Adaeze said. "Not because of him." She glanced briefly toward Kanayo, then back. "Because of me. I stopped waiting on you the day I stopped needing you to explain yourself." Kelechi had no 5 million naira answer for that. He had nothing at all. A few neighbors had gathered near the gate, the way neighbors always seem to gather at exactly the wrong moment, and Kelechi felt, for the first time, something close to what Adaeze had felt standing at that altar. Watched, exposed, already a story before he had even left the scene. He turned and walked, this time with nothing waiting for him outside the gate. No money, no woman, no version of himself left to perform for anyone watching. Months later, the decorations going up at the same family compound looked nothing like the ones before. No nervous secret buzzing on anyone's phone. No uninvited guest sitting 3 rows back, waiting to see if her hold would survive a vow. Just Adaeze, in a dress she had made with her own hands again, and a man standing at the altar who had never once needed convincing to choose her. When the priest reached the same words that had once broken her, Kanayo didn't blink. For richer, for poorer. He had inherited more wealth than most men see in a lifetime, and still the only answer that mattered to him was the one he gave without a second of hesitation. I do. This time, somebody actually meant it. What everyone around her saw that day was disappointment. What they could not see was the glory God had already begun preparing for Adaeze long before she understood it herself. Her life did not change on its own timing. It changed the moment he decided it would. Some situations only look like punishment because we cannot yet see what is quietly being built behind them. Adaeze's story is proof that God's process is never wasted, even when it looks like the opposite. Trust God's process.